And now hymn 210, Wade in the Water.
Resist and rejoice. This was the message at this year's Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. 11 of us from All Souls joined 4,000 other UUs from 1,000 congregations around the country in New Orleans to worship and reflect. We found our fellow UUs united and clear about the difficult work that our shared faith is calling us to do, both within our congregations and in the larger world. We've come back to All Souls inspired, focused, and excited to share with you what we have learned. Come, let us resist and rejoice together. Please join me in reciting our covenant while Jane lights our chalice. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Please turn and greet your neighbor. I invite the children to come down and join us on the front for our time for all ages. Oh, could you three come over here? Thank you, thank you. Any other children? You don't have to be young of age. You can be young of heart. Come on down. Actually, Ben, can you scoot right over? Scoot, scoot, scoot. Scoot, scoot, scoot. Scoot, scoot, scoot. Oh, here we have two more coming. Can you keep scooting so we can keep the kids together? There we go. Judy, can you keep scooting? In fact, you know what? Judy, Jane, and Ben, why can you pop over there? Thank you. We have a plethora of children. It's absolutely wonderful. Come on down and join us on the... Oh, are you good? Okay, that's actually wonderful. Sorry, ladies. So, you just heard me tell everybody that we went to General Assembly. 4,000 UUs got together for 5 days. Oh my goodness. What do you think we did? Any ideas what we did? I know, it's kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? So what we did broke down to 3 different things. And the first thing we did, most days, twice a day, in the morning and again in the evening, is we had worship service. Can you imagine 4,000 people together in a worship service? Yeah, it's a lot, right, Gayatri? How many people do you think we have here? What do you think, Ellie? How many people we got here today? About 100. I think that's a pretty good guess, don't you? About 100? Can you imagine a convention hall full of 4,000 UUs worshiping together? It was quite something. So that's what we did first thing in the morning, and that's what we did most evenings. In the afternoons, we had workshops. What do you think workshops are? What would be another word for workshops? School. Yes, we had classes in the afternoon. And we had 3 1.25-hour sessions. One afternoon we had 4. And there were all these different classes that we could go to. And we could choose where we wanted to go. So we all went to classes. Okay, so we go on vacation, us adults, and we go somewhere where we choose to go to classes in the afternoons. Does that sound a little nutty? Yeah, adults, right? What would you do with us? But why did we go? We went because what was being talked about in the classes was really, really important to us. Although, I have to say, sometimes trying to figure out what the class was about was a little difficult from the title. Let me share one with you. One of the titles was Empowering Song, Tools for Musical Outreach and Inreach. I went, and I'm still not sure what it meant, but the singing was fun. So that was our afternoons. The third thing we did in the mornings was something called general session. Now, for you to understand general session, let me see if I can explain. At school, you spend most of your time in classrooms, right? And what happens in the classroom, in one classroom, is different to what happens in another classroom and another classroom because the teachers are all different, right? But is there somebody or some people that make sure that all the classes are kind of headed in the right direction? Are there people at school that do that? Who does that at school, El? The principal, right. So at school, you have a principal, and you have an assistant principal, and you have people in the office, and they're the ones that sort of bring it all together and make sure everyone's headed in the right direction, the same direction, right? We have that here at church. We have the Unitarian Universalist Association, and they are just like that. They do that for us. One of the things that we did in general session is we voted in a new president of the UUA, and we have our first female elected president of the UUA, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. Yes, you can clap. I think that is a clapping moment. So what we do in general session is that the UUA come and they tell us what they've been working on. And 4,000 people in a hall discuss it. Yeah, does that sound like chaos? Oh, it is. It is. There are several different mics that people can come to. And one of the mics is called a procedural mic. And that's a mic people come to if they're confused about what's going on. I think probably 50% of the time, that's what we're doing. Somebody at the mic saying, I don't think we should be doing this now. Should we be doing this now? It's very, it's fun. There was one thing, though. So we discuss and then we vote. It's very democratic. We discuss and then we vote. And there was one thing that we voted on this year that I wanted to share with you. And it's about our UU principles. Who can tell me how many UU principles we have? Gayatri. 7. We have 7 UU principles. Can one of the children tell me what exactly are our principles? What do they mean? That's right. What do they mean? Thank you so much for that clarification. What do they mean? Are they the things that guide us? Yes, they are the things that guide us. Well, you're not going to believe this, but we are thinking about adding an 8th principle. The UUA have been working on an 8th principle, and that 8th principle we voted on forming a committee to come up with the language for the 8th principle. Now, what do you think we as a UU community feel is absolutely vital to us that is missing from our 8th principle? Grown-ups, any ideas? What is missing that is absolutely vital to us UUs? Any ideas? Grown-ups. So shall I tell you? All right. The 8th principle that we are thinking of adding is being committed to creating a beloved community. That is not in our principles right now, and we are thinking of adding it. So, a beloved community. Can anybody tell me what does that mean? What's a beloved community? It's something we say here a lot, isn't it? Gayatri, what's a beloved community? Is it a community that excludes people, or is it a community that includes everybody? Everybody, that's right. It's a community that includes everybody. Can you think of a time when you've experienced the beloved community, when people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all different ages have come together? Can you think of a time like that? Yeah. Say that again. Oh, thank you. Time for all ages is a time like that. I agree with you. So we will keep you updated. When we go back next year to GA, we will find out what the committee came up with. We will discuss it, and then we will probably vote on it. So we will keep you posted. Now is the time to sing our children to church school, and it's number 1030 in the Teal hymnal, and we are going to sing it in English.
Good morning, everyone. Most of you, I think, know me, but I'm Greg Sanders, and I'm the music director here at All Souls. I want to make a quick announcement, and that is that both today and next Sunday, we have a visiting sound expert in town to sort of help us set up our new soundboard and these new fabulous wireless microphones that I'm currently holding, and the new lavaliers that we got. And his name is Jeremy Clifford, and I want you to give him a warm welcome. He's up there working today. Say hi to Jeremy. So after the service today and also next week, Jeremy is leading orientation sessions for anyone who's interested in serving in a sound capacity here at the church. It's a very important function that we sometimes overlook here, frankly, and so we're trying to do a better job with that. So if you're interested in volunteering in that capacity and helping run the board during a service, I invite you to stick around. It'll happen upstairs both this week and next week after the service is over. It's pretty foolproof what we picked out, so if you feel like you're not really a sound guy, I'm not either, and I think I could do it, so if I can do it, you can do it. It's also the case that we've looked at all those headsets that are in the back for those of you who have a harder time hearing, and we have 4 completely functioning headsets now. So if you want to use those, they actually work. I checked them all yesterday. So we're sort of improving our space here and making things a little bit better and more user-friendly for all of us. So if you hear him talking up there during the service today and next week, please be patient and understand that we're doing a lot to make the space more welcoming for anyone who might come. So thank you for your time, and we'll move on with the service now.
The reading today is a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. Naomi's father was from Palestine, and her mother was a white American. Naomi was born in St. Louis, Missouri. She spent her high school years in Ramallah in Palestine, and then returned to this country to settle in San Antonio, Texas. Her poem is entitled Gate A4, and it was the reading at the worship service last Sunday at GA. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled on the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight agent. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly in Arabic. The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and she spoke for a while, and they spoke for a while in Arabic, and found out, of course, that they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mum from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green, furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around the gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. During the silent meditation, I invite you to reflect on the wondering question that I asked the children and a follow-up question. When have you experienced the beloved community? And what do you think we have to do here at church to be radically welcoming enough to allow for that possibility here?
I'm Judy Murphy, and I was one of the attendees at GA this year. And as Annie pointed out, we had various services in the morning and then attended workshops in the afternoon. There were usually 3 or 4 at the same time that you wanted to go to, so you had to figure out which one was most important and forget the others. I can't at this point remember exactly which workshop it was that I was at, but in all the workshops, ideas or questions were thrown out and for discussion. And we were asked to select a few people near us, people we didn't know, to discuss these ideas and questions. And I noticed, glancing at his badge, that an elderly African-American man in my group was from Birmingham, Alabama. Have you been there long? I asked. 39 years, he said. Did you know Ed Harris? Yes, he knew Ed Harris. I told him that Ed had been a beloved member or beloved leader of this congregation, and he asked where that was. And when I told him, he told me his story of becoming a Unitarian. He and his wife belonged to a Lutheran church in Kokomo and decided that a good educational program for a certain group of children in his church would be to visit a variety of other churches to see what their worship services were like and what they believed in. They did the usual round of Catholic and Protestant churches. Then they decided to check out a congregation that they really knew nothing about, so they brought their children to Indianapolis, and specifically to All Souls Unitarian Church. Paul Beatty was preaching at that time. After returning the children to their various homes, he and his wife turned to one another with a look of knowing realization, and they confessed in amazement they'd always been Unitarians. They found that there had been a Unitarian fellowship in Kokomo, but it no longer existed, so they started one themselves. And eventually, his wife became a Unitarian minister. It's pretty profound and humbling to learn that one way or another, All Souls has helped spread the growth of Unitarian Universalism and its ministry. I'm sure Paul Beatty's preaching was critical to this revelation, but I also hope it was the warm welcome they received from the congregation and the great coffee hour. So let's remember that when we do church well together, we can have a significant impact, even if we don't discover it for several years. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jane Gosling. General Assembly changes you. New Orleans is the 3rd GA I've now attended. While each one had addressed issues of racial inequality and social justice, this year's GA was laser focused on our white supremacy-based institutional practices. It, along with my recent participation in one of the beloved conversation groups here at All Souls, caused me to take a real and personal deep dive to further examine how my white privilege has shaped my life. I was raised as a Unitarian in Elkhart, Indiana, and my parents were involved in organizations such as the Urban League, so I was taught all people are equal, but I was still white, middle class, living and going to school in an all-white suburban neighborhood. I can remember being frightened of starting high school because this was the time of civil unrest and racial riots being shown regularly on the evening news. I was frightened there were going to be race riots in high school because there were going to be African Americans in my high school. I joined the YWCA's Y-Teens group, where we attempted to deal with these feelings of uncertainty. They brought white kids and kids of color together to get to know one another. I learned my fears were founded on ignorance and misinformation, but I ended up remaining in my white privilege bubble as I went on to college and after I moved to Indianapolis, and for the next 40 years. I didn't understand how my white privilege was part of a systemic societal problem. By attending this year's GA, it made me question my white privilege and how I had continued this legacy in raising my two sons, who are now 25 and 28. One session at GA that I chose to attend was Children and Race. The talk is happening too late. I wondered what it was I should have talked to my sons about when they were younger. I learned that avoidance, assumptions that children are colorblind, and that just saying everyone is equal doesn't work. I learned, in fact, that racial identity begins to develop by 3 and 4 years of age, that children notice, absorb, and enact patterns of power and privilege in their environment at this young age. Children identify with social groups they view as comparatively superior to find ways to say, I'm better than you. By age 3 and 4, children can internalize feelings of superiority or feelings of oppression. It was noted that shaming children and telling them they're wrong to feel these things will just push these feelings below the surface, that they won't learn to deal with them. It is better to engage and disrupt these thought processes by raising secure children so they don't feel the need to feel superior, by encouraging critical thinking and empathy, by building a capacity for caring, by showing that you care, by doing our own work as adults and letting our kids see it, by talking with our kids about race and racism in everyday ways through things they see on TV, in books, at play dates, camps, and in school, or what they observe in their own neighborhoods. Allow your children to feel discomfort and challenge yourself to be uncomfortable and talk about the hard stuff. Even if you don't always get it right, at least they will see you trying. Ground your discussions in our UUA principles, emphasizing the interdependent web of life and that we value the inherent worth and dignity of all people. After attending this Children and Race session, I felt some grief and sadness that I hadn't been aware enough to have discussions with my sons about white privilege. They were raised here at All Souls, so they were taught that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. I'm very grateful they grew up in a more racially diverse schools, and they certainly have been exposed to and feel part of a more global and multicultural world. But we haven't had real discussions about white privilege and what that means. I have been woke to the realities of white supremacy still working in our American society, and I want them to be woke as well. As Margaret Wheatley is quoted, human conversation is the most ancient and easiest way to cultivate conditions for change. If we can sit together and talk about what's important to us, we begin to come alive. We share what we see, what we feel, and we listen to what others see and feel. The simplest way to begin finding each other again is to start talking about what we care about. I have realized that perhaps if I'm still a lifelong learner and doing this work at my age, it's not too late to have these discussions with my sons so that they can be woke and join me on this journey of challenges, insight, learning, and trying to make a difference. Thank you.
Good morning. We heard a lot of heady terms at GA last week in the context of addressing the white supremacist society, a loaded, heady term itself. We heard the terms proximity, decentering whiteness, and intersectionality. So in order to unpack all these concepts, I thought I better attend the 3-part workshop, Undoing Racism. Alas, the presenter of this workshop was a no-show. In a quick attempt to redeem the session, someone from the crowd took to the stage and suggested that we dialogue with the people at our table about racism. What is it? How do we combat it? In other words, let's figure out world peace in 45 minutes. So Jerry, Milton, and I found ourselves at a table with some white folk and two black ladies. As instructed, we introduced ourselves and gave our reasons for attending this workshop. The white folks all gave some heady, brain-centered reason for coming. But the black ladies, their reasons for being there were centered on their emotions. One lady said, "I'm angry and frustrated and sad." Suddenly, the other lady challenged the white folk around the table with the question, "Are you my ally? What do you think it means to be my ally?" I offered up an example of how I thought I had been an ally for race justice. But this lady, she wasn't buying it. She said she wasn't sure yet if any of us were her ally. This black lady said, listen, I have a story to tell you. She talked about being raised in a middle-class family where all the adults were educated. They made sure that she got an education. Indeed, she had earned several degrees, had worked in her chosen career, and was now retired due to disabilities. She had also raised her children, and they were leading successful lives. Despite her family's success in attaining the accolades that are respected in America, she was worried about her grandson. She went on to tell us about her grandson had some learning disabilities that required that he have an IEP. But she and her daughter, the grandson's mother, were having a terrible time with the school administrators in getting them to implement the agreed-upon plan to help her grandson. At this point, the moderator interrupted us with instructions to move on to the next sets of questions that he had just made up the moment before. We ignored him. IEP, I thought. I know something about IEPs, or individualized education plans. My son had had one while in school, and I, too, had struggled with getting administrators to implement my son's plan. I thought, oh, I know exactly what they're going through. And I said, oh, yes. School administrators don't respect mothers. I was connecting with this woman's pain, or so I thought. Now, in another session I attended, Robin DeAngelo, who's coming here on July 22nd, and I got to tell you, she had standing room only for 3 workshops. Well, she at one point in her talk challenged all the feminists, that would be me, in the room in thinking that sexism that we've experienced would even begin to resemble racism. Racism operates at a far deeper, more hateful level than we white women will ever understand. Ouch. The lady at our table continued. At every meeting with school administrators, the agenda she and her daughter had carefully crafted, demonstrating how the IEP was not working, was ambushed. The administrators refused to hear the woman's concern. The conversation was continuously derailed by the administrator's tales of her son's latest infractions. At every meeting, they presented a narrative that this woman's grandson was bad. We could tell from the look on her face how devastating these assessments of her grandson were to her. Her grandson is smart, capable, filled with potential, a human being. He just needs help to realize it. But these school administrators, the look in her eyes was fear. During her acceptance speech at the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Leadership Award, racial justice and civil rights activist and co-convener of the Women's March, yes, the one we all marched in this past January, Linda Sarsour, told us that the most important thing white allies can do in the fight for justice is to put people who are targets of racism and hate in the center. Let them lead the conversation. And Linda went on to say that the very most important person to put in the center of the center are African American mothers, for they have known the very most pain. What became more clear as this woman described her struggle with the school system was that she truly feared what could happen to her grandson. Unlike me, who was frustrated that my son possibly wasn't going to be able to reach his best and highest intellectual ability, this woman, she feared that her grandson's daily exposure in the state compulsory school system could lead him directly to prison. For her, the school-to-prison pipeline was a real potential outcome for her grandson. Her grandson, a descendant of educated, middle-class, upstanding black folk, was in jeopardy of being corralled from school straight to prison. The Ware Lecturer speaker, Brian Stevenson, a renowned attorney and author who represents death row convicted persons and young black defendants charged with trumped-up, insidious crimes, described this school-to-prison pipeline. And at our GA closing ceremony, we heard from a mother who feared that her middle school-age son who started to get suspended from school, that he would end up in jail. And he did. She described how her heart broke when she saw her 13-year-old son in shackles. So what can we do? Brian Stevenson told us that the first thing we as white folks can do in the fight for racial justice is to get close to those most touched by racial injustice. He said, get yourself into proximity with their lives. Show up, be present, listen, witness. Our session ended, but before we scattered, the black woman said, wait. I want you to know that I do believe you are all my allies. We had done nothing but listen to her story. But for this proud and scared grandmother, it was enough for her that we listened, that we believed her, and we were with her. We were by her side. We all hugged her before racing to the next event. Teacher after teacher at the conference reminded me that undoing racism consists of a simple step. Show up, be present, listen, witness. It was true this day, listening and a hug, tiny but oh so significant acts to undo racism.
On Saturday night, Brian Stevenson shared several stories as part of the Ware Lecture, which was a keynote event of General Assembly. If you don't know, Brian is the founder and executive director of Equal Justice Initiative and the author of Just Mercy. His stories were mostly about black men and boys that were in prison, many facing the death penalty. My emotions were running on overload as he made their plight palpable. In one of his stories, Brian told us about a phone call, one that he hated to make. He needed to tell a young man on death row that despite all their collective efforts, there were no more options. The young, mentally challenged man would be executed at the hands of the state of Alabama. His client sobbed and stuttered uncontrollably as he tried to thank Brian for his efforts. Brian listened compassionately and patiently to his client, but Brian was also remembering a person from his past. When Brian was about 12 years old, he had made fun of another child, a child who stuttered. Brian's mother made him apologize and give the boy a hug and tell him that he loved him. So Brian was almost a teenager, so you know how mom's advice went. He went along with it, but despite his less than fully authentic effort, the other boy hugged him back and told him that he loved Brian too. I reflected that this boy had made a lasting impact on Brian's journey, perhaps a transformational moment in the formation of Brian's character and his worldview. And as Brian told his story, my thoughts wandered to events in my life, and they began to be drawn to another young boy, a boy named Zachariah, who is one of my kiddos I serve as a court-appointed special advocate, a CASA. I first met Zach in the fall of 2010 when he was 11. Zach had been involved with Marion County's child welfare system since 2005, when he was removed from his biological parents' home at the age of 6. Zach presented to me as a slightly chubby, loving, lovable black boy with an engaging smile. But I was soon to learn that there was a lot more to understanding Zach beyond my first impressions. When I reviewed all of Zach's records, I learned that there had been 3 substantiated cases of abuse and neglect, including sexual assault by his biological father. I later learned that Zach had an IQ of 56, and he suffered from chronic PTSD, among a plethora of other behavioral disorders. And he had been in 12 different placements and was soon to be moved into his 13th. I'm happy to say that he is still in his 13th placement with a loving foster mom who, with the help of a dedicated team of support service providers, have helped Zach make great strides. But Zach still has many demons. Those demons surface whenever he finds himself in an unpleasant situation, like when he is bullied or teased, or maybe just doesn't like what others are telling him. And in these situations, the most persistent and effective coping skill for him is verbal and physical aggression. Zach is 18 now. He has grown into a very handsome young man, over 6 foot, and a well-chiseled body thanks to a better diet and a lot of time in the weight room. And on first impression, he doesn't present like someone with a 56 IQ or someone with significant behavioral disorders. He still has that engaging smile, and he's still loving and lovable. But Zach has a long and continuing history of physical aggression, including one incident on as recent as Memorial Day. And coupled with his current strength, he has the physical capacity to inflict serious damage on others. Given Zach's history and the terrible truths about how our justice system often operates, my fears drove me to a vision of the future where Zach, too, would end up on death row, waiting to be executed. And just like in Brian's story, me or anyone else wouldn't be able to do anything to stop it. But wait, thanks to my GA experience, I now had more skills and strategies to help make systemic changes. And I knew that I had lots of UU partners in the fight. I could help make that change for the future. At GA, I had gained a renewed confidence that systemic changes are possible. A justice system that is not really just or fair at all, especially for people of color and other marginalized peoples, could be changed, and I could help make it happen. My love for Zach, my faith, and knowing that there were caring people like Brian Stevenson, along with many thousand fellow UUs, renewed my confidence in a different future. GA has given me hope that together, hand in hand and stone by stone, we can build a different world and can change the future for Zachariah and 1,000 others like him. May it be so for this young man that I love like family. And may it be so for all the families in our land. Amen, Ashe, blessed be.
My focus at GA this year was on climate justice. It is something that I work for with an organization in Indianapolis and in Carmel. And if anybody would like me to share on what I learned, I'm willing to talk to anyone after the service. But Anastasia, who cannot be here, has asked me to share some words from her. Over the last week, we Unitarian Universalists faced a real test of our principles and values. On Saturday night, we heard Brian Stevenson speak about the humanity of those men he legally represents in prison and on death row. And many were like Jerry, crying or simply moved by compassion and connectedness as we embraced Brian's stories. We left feeling tender and full of hope and potential. Just a few hours later, 2 UUA staff members were violently attacked in the French Quarter. One is still recovering from an acute brain injury in the New Orleans hospital. On Sunday morning, we wondered if these UUs were attacked for being gay. But we learned over the hours that it was more senseless than that. It was a mugging, and a very violent one. And I have seen the video. Very violent. Over the past week, we have held these 2 victims, James Curran and Tim Byrne, in our care and our circles of support. We ask that you include them in your thoughts this week. We've also not maligned the predators, the 4 at-risk men, ages 18 to 20, whose stories we do not know, but whose humanity we never failed to recognize. You can only truly know what you believe when our values are tested, as ours were when our people were attacked. Our newly elected UUA president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, wrote this week, "These are our Unitarian Universalist values of love, forgiveness, redemption, and mercy that are calling us to live in the reality of the heartbreak of our world while remembering that no one is outside the circle of love." We lived these values when we collectively raised over $200,000 at last Sunday's General Assembly worship service for the families and friends of Louisiana's incarcerated children. We lived these values when we elected Reverend Susan Frederick Gray to be our first elected woman UUA president. We lived these values when we moved away from the exclusive gender language found within our second principle to read that we will be inspired by the words and deeds of prophetic people instead of simply prophetic men and women. We lived these values when we uplifted and unanimously voted to support the proposed 8th principle, which reads, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountability dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." I am thrilled to share that Paula Cole-Jones, one of the 2 co-authors of this 8th principle, will be in our pulpit next week. We lived these values when members of All Souls stood on Friday in witness and solidarity with Aaron Bailey's daughter, who was broken with grief and the desiring for justice when her father was shot by police this Thursday here in Indianapolis. We live our values when we invite Robin DiAngelo to our church, so we and people from around this city can explore this confusing and real thing called white supremacy in a safe, challenging, and transformative way. Several of us heard her at GA, and she is not to be missed. Our values are in each and everything we do. As we approach our weekly moment of collective generosity, I want you to know that this week we will share half of the cash and marked checks with the Unitarian Universalist Association, which provides us with incredible opportunities, such as General Assembly. Together as Unitarian Universalists, we explore how to live our shared values and how to take them out into the world in partnership with others. Our generosity today will support these goals going forward. Before you reach for your wallet, I invite you to fill out your connection card. On the back are some invitations, as well as some questions we ask about your ethnic background and about your level of understanding of your cultural heritage. We use these to better understand who is in our congregation and as a benchmark for our long-term demographic trends, and to help us shape our intercultural learning curriculum. We get the most complete picture when everyone fills out a card. So please do so this morning. In a couple of minutes, the collection will be greatly received. Thank you.
Thank you for your generosity this morning as we live into the spirit of generosity by sharing our plate with the UUA Program Fund. And Mara will be introducing our final hymn.
Good morning. My name is Mara Scott, and I was one of the attendees at General Assembly this year. Now, at General Assembly, I was part of a discussion which centered around a UU congregation that had been, quote, so successful at their social justice program that longstanding members were now uncomfortable with how much the service had changed. There was a whole list of things that had changed, one of which was the music. There was now lots of gospel music, lots of music in different languages, and people were complaining, saying, it's too strange, I don't know it. These folks would even exclaim, I feel like I don't even know my own church anymore. Well, of course, we love to debate, as UUs, and what ensued was a lovely discussion. Of course, the obvious answer to this conundrum is to say, well, learn them. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work. For one thing, we can't just switch back to the old service. Some people, in fact, felt that the new services changes were helping them to experience their spirituality in new ways that they'd never thought of before. But also, we need to be a real beloved community, welcoming all races, all ethnicities, all backgrounds. And one of the most welcoming areas that we can offer is our gift of song. We UUs are especially partial to song. There was a lot of singing at GA. Now, arguing constantly will not accomplish this. So how can we do this? Well, first, we need to recognize that we are wonderful at being the well, actually people, which can lead to very lengthy discussions. Secondly, we must validate the concerns of these people before we can hope to come to an understanding. More importantly, before we can move forward together. And thirdly, we need to use the word and, not the word but. So, the songs. Quick survey, how many of you were born into Unitarianism? Okay, a couple of you. You're the lucky ones. So the rest of us, we came here. We were once new. Yes, these songs may be new. Yes, the words may be hard to pronounce. Yes, it's not as comfortable as singing the good old songs that we always sing. And there are others that don't feel the same comfort from the good old songs that you do. And weren't you new once? Didn't you have to learn words in order of service once? What about how any new folks to the church might feel? Did you not once feel out of place as a new person, and you felt welcomed by the UU community, and so you stayed? I think that many of us would agree that UU churches are kind of a catch-all for those of us that do not find solace elsewhere. UU churches are a safe haven, but for some, it is not. For some, they come seeking solace, and they may not find any. They may even find that they are spurned. This is a story that could happen anywhere. This has happened here at All Souls. Not really a pleasant feeling, is it? Now is the point where I wrap up and give a happy ending. But the problem is, the problem is, the ending is up to us. We, you, and I, we dictate how happy it is. One way we can do this is by showing others our love, offering a beloved community to whomever will accept it by learning new songs. Such a simple act, and such a powerful one. And now, we will sing a new song in round. We are expecting a lot from you today. Number 1003 in your teal hymnal, Where Do We Come From? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from?
Those of us who went to GA had 5 days to process and digest what we were hearing and experiencing and what we just laid on you in 1 short hour. Let us take our expanded awareness as well as the hope that we felt here this morning out into the world with us. Let us go out into the world and start creating the beloved community that we dream about. Let it be so.